Okay, good afternoon, folks. We'll get underway. We have added a small routine to our meetings in keeping with the rest of Seguin Township's meetings, the land acknowledgement. So I will read that before we start. Before we begin today's meeting, Seguin Township acknowledges that we are on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe peoples in the Huron-Robinson Treaty area. We recognize and respect the long history of the First Nations and Métis peoples on this land, and that this region continues to be home to many thriving First Nations communities that have lived on Turtle Island for time immemorial. Seguin Township is committed to ongoing learning, responsible stewardship of our planet, and building relationships to help create a better future for generations to come. So I will require a mover and seconder to start today's meeting, please. Moved by Lee, seconded by Webb. That the Committee of Adjustment for the Corporation of the Township of Seguin hereby convenes at 4:01 p.m. on Wednesday, November 13th, 2024. All in favor? And carried. So the Committee of Adjustment hereby convenes a public meeting as per the Planning Act. Applicants and the public can speak at the public meeting. When asked who wishes to speak to an application, please raise your hand, state your name and address, and direct all comments through me, the chair. Notice of decisions will be sent to applicants and to the public if requested. Only the prescribed persons as per the Planning Act may appeal a decision or condition of approval within 20 days after the decision. If you are attending remotely, please pay attention to your microphone settings. Stay muted unless you are speaking, please. And if you are attending here, if you're asked to speak, please approach the podium and tap the button on the microphone to get onto the public record. So I require a mover and seconder, please, to approve today's agenda. Moved by Greg, seconded by Lynn. That the Committee of Adjustment for the Corporation of the Township of Seguin hereby approves the agenda for the November 13th, 2024 hearing. All in favor? And carried. And one more time, a mover and seconder, please, to approve the minutes of the last meeting. Lee and Greg. Moved by Lee, seconded by Greg, that the Committee of the Adjustment for the Corporation of the Township of Seguin hereby accepts as read and circulated the minutes of its last hearing that took place Wednesday, October the 9th, 2024. All in favor? And carried. I now ask the Committee of Adjustment for disclosure of any pecuniary interest with respect to today's applications. Any conflicts to declare? Okay, none heard. So we have a couple of deferrals. I will ask Ashley to introduce the first. Go ahead, Ashley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This first one is a memo for minor variance application A-2024-0036-F, Glen Burnie, to be deferred until the December 11th, 2024 hearing. And no formal correspondence was received.
Yeah, so any comments? Otherwise, this will just get carried over, so it's recirculated and then it makes it back to the next meeting. So mover and seconder, please, for the deferral, Greg and Len. Moved by Greg, seconded by Len, that the Committee of Adjustment hereby defers application A 2024-0036-F for Glen Burnie until December 11th, 2024 Committee of Adjustment hearing to recirculate the public notice to include the new variance request. All in favor? And carried. And one more time, please.
So that one will be recirculated for the December 11th hearing. And then the next one is a minor variance application A-2024-0038-M for Morrow to be deferred as well until the December 11th, 2024 hearing. Again, no correspondence was received.
Okay, thanks. So mover and seconder, please, for the deferral, Greg and Lee. Moved by Greg, seconded by Lee, that the Committee of Adjustment hereby defers variance application A 2024-0038-M for Morrow until the December 11th, 2024 Committee of Adjustment hearing to recirculate the public notice to include the new variance request. All in favor? And carried.
And then that one again will be recirculated for the December 11th hearing.
Okay, moving into live applications for this meeting. Madam Secretary Treasurer, if you could introduce us, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The purpose of minor variance application A-2024-0039-H Cosma is to construct a new dock with a boat lift on the subject lands. The applicants are requesting a variance for an increase in maximum length of a dock extending into the water body. Correspondence and objection to the application was received from multiple neighboring properties.
Thank you, Ashley. So we have, I believe, Mr. Cosma here. Do you wish to speak to your application? Yeah, please approach the podium and press the microphone button.
I just wanted to say a couple things that we're new owners of 38 Summit Drive. We bought this summer, and the property is somewhat unique that there's a large creek that drains into the waters in front of us, putting sediment down into that area. And it makes a lovely beach that we're looking to protect, and also to have a dock so that we can enjoy the water as well. And we've made effort to try to protect the waterfront as much by making a 6-foot wide walkway to our dock and trying to keep the boats away from the shoreline that we would like to keep as it is. So there were a lot of objections raised by our neighbors, and we're mindful of that. And there were concerns about navigation of the waterway extending that much further out, but we're not on a point. We're kind of in the bottom of a shallow V. So and the waterways in our bay is fairly large. So I didn't really see those as concerns. And I think that we considered it a minor variance and made the application as such. And that's pretty much what I want to say at this point in time.
Okay, thank you, sir. Maybe just stay there for 1 second in case committee has questions for you. Committee members, questions for Mr. Cosma? Lee.
The nature of the dock, is it a crib? Is it a steel dock or is it a floating dock, the proposed dock?
The proposed dock that we're proposing would be steel piles. That's what we'd be looking to do.
Thank you. I've done a lot of research on and trying to find information with regards to water fluctuation. Do you know how much the water might fluctuate during the year?
There were reports from a consultant that worked for, I think it was Hatch or somebody like that did some reports, and don't recall the exact number, but I saw about 2 feet of variation in the water between the peak and the trough.
There is a variance.
There, yes, it seems to be. We've witnessed a variance on our shoreline a bit, and our shoreline is very shallow. So when the water depth drops, our shore gets longer. And so part of our dock, about 1 meter or so of our dock, is usually over land because it's going through the high water mark and the shoreline aren't exactly the same thing. It depends on the water level. And because it's very shallow, the shoreline moves quite a bit.
Then looking at your application, it says an average depth of 1.2 meters, so during low water, you could be in the area of only 3 feet deep at the end.
Yes, it's possible, but I would rather find my boat sitting on a lift, not being usable, than sitting on the bed.
Okay,
So from my perspective, if the water were to drop and I can't use my boat, that's much better than the alternative.
okay, that's it for me.
Go ahead, please, Greg.
Thank you. Mr. Cosmo, when I attended the site, your floating portion of the dock was tied up to the shore. But looking at where the current dock is, it appeared that the water was deep enough to be navigable to secure your boat to the dock, correct?
The boat that we had right now is a 16-foot boat. Okay, when we park it on the existing dock, the front of our boat is rubbing on the sand. You know, so that is an issue. Yeah, I believe boats have become deeper. The newer boats that they have now have a deeper, what they call that,
Keel.
The keel or the
keel,
hull?
yeah, deeper. And so the newer boats are very expensive and a big investment that we'd like to protect with a lift. And I think the minimum water depth for the boat without fuel is 2 foot 8 inches. Draft, I think the word is that they use in that description. So a little bit of wave or fuel in the boat, and you're looking at 3 feet.
And you mentioned that you made the decision to apply for a minor variance. You thought it was minor. Was there any discussion or thought in regards to a zoning bylaw amendment application as opposed to a minor variance?
We approached the town planning department and asked them how to proceed and would a minor variance be acceptable? And that's how we proceeded. We first contacted the planning department to give us a decision on major or minor.
Okay, thank you. And quite honestly, my concern, having visited the site, it appears that the waters are navigable for a boat to be able to be docked at the current dock as it sits. Cameron Bay, as you mentioned, it is not a large body of water on Cameron Bay. And looking at where your property is situated relative to your neighbors, that really a 25-foot extension or close to it would put it beyond what the purpose of the zoning bylaw was. And I think that for me personally, I have a concern that a 55% increase on what the current zoning bylaw is for, and I do respect the value of boats and the potential for water to drop, rise and fall. But I think that with Cameron Bay being a protected narrow body of water on Lake Rosso, that's my concern with this being deemed as a minor variance. I personally would think it would, in my opinion, that it would require, it's not minor. And I think that if it would be something that would be required to go to council as a zoning bylaw amendment to be considered. Thank you.
Yes, rebuttal, please.
So then my question is because of the extent of the request, you considered a major requiring a zoning amendment?
My personal opinion is that it's not minor. The zoning bylaw, although historically council and I'm trying to think back on my time on the Committee of Adjustment, I've been on it now for 6 years, that for a dock extension to go beyond what the zoning bylaw dictates is usually specific to certain properties that do not have enough navigable water to be able to dock a boat at. So there are certain places on certain lakes where you can be out the 15 meters and only be in 6 inches of water. So in that case, you know, I have seen dock extensions go through. And in fairness, in this range of 55%, but having been on site, it appears that the waters are navigable to be able to put a dock. It fits the zoning bylaw, and as such, I do not feel that it's a minor variance. It would be something that would, I think, should be considered under a zoning bylaw amendment, not a minor variance, because I think it's outside of the scope of the Committee of Adjustment.
Thank you, Greg. Go ahead, Mr. Cosmo.
So my question is, it's because of the amount that we're asking for that you consider it not a minor, or is it just the fact that it's navigable, so therefore it's major?
Well, I think that the dock that you have was permitted in, I believe, 2022. There was a permit obtained for that dock. I think the dock is actually 17 meters. 15, which extends out into the waterway. I believe the 2 meters is probably the cribbing that's on the on your beachfront there. So I think that that application met the zoning bylaw, provided the ability to enjoy the water, to moor a boat at the dock, and it fulfills the intent of the zoning bylaw. To go outside of the zoning bylaw, to go for the purpose of extending it out 25 feet for the reason of putting in a boat lift, I do not think fits the criteria of the Committee of Adjustment. I think it falls within the realm of a zoning bylaw amendment application, if in fact you want to ask for that extension.
If the request was a 5-meter addition as opposed to the 8, would that have made a difference in your opinion?
The application was for
I know, I understand.
8.3. So I'm not going to speak in hypotheticals. I've given the reason why I believe the zoning bylaw, I think, is there for a reason. I think that the ability to enjoy the intent of the zoning bylaw, to be able to be on the water, to be able to moor a boat, is able to be fulfilled within the current zoning bylaw. I think going beyond that, if it was, then I think it falls into a zoning bylaw amendment because it is for personal choice. And I think that that would be the reason. That's the reason why I think it should be the application should be a zoning bylaw amendment if you so choose. But I can't support a minor variance for something that fulfills the zoning bylaw and provides access onto the water with the intent of the official plan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a little further on Greg's comment. A minor variance is also, it's a privilege. It's really more to, look at hardship for practical reasons, not necessarily, I don't want to say it this way, but it's not really for a luxury in that sense. So, if there is an existing way to use the property and dock, or a less intrusive way to make it more usable, but there's clearly a lot of sentiment also just around a boat lift and the necessity for a boat lift. And, it's when you put it all together, then there's that assessment. Is this all minor, or is there a way to reduce the project, perhaps to make it more acceptable or more minor? Lots of suggestions out there for, other types of mechanisms to secure your boat that doesn't require such a large structure, for example. So just putting that out there for you to think about. Any other comments from committee? Lee, please.
One more thing comes to mind and we talked about navigation. And one thing we haven't touched on is in the winter, snowmobiles. That's a pretty long jut out into the lake. And if it gets even slightly covered over with snow and somebody connects with that, it's a disaster.
Thanks, Lee. Committee, other comments? Otherwise, we'll, go ahead, Len, please. Mike, please, Len, please turn on your microphone. Still can't hear you, Len. Len, we'll give you a minute to sort that out. We have another comment on the line as well. So we'll go to Mr. Marshall if you're wanting to. Oh, okay, you're live, Len. Go ahead.
Let him go ahead first, and I'll come in after. Okay.
No, you go ahead. You're
Okay.
here now. Let's hear your comment.
Well, I guess I'm a little confused in the both the responses, whether it is a minor or major, and the fact, as far as I'm concerned, is that there's a lot of information here that to me it needs more interpretation. For example, does it really bother a habitat? That's something that is significant to it being a major or a minor variable. And are there any peer assessments? It seems to me there's a lot of information that is quite nebulous in this. It says right in the application that should you think there's a problem, there should be a peer assessment. The points made in the proposals are that it's shallow land, that is a habitat for wildlife. Is that significant enough to make it not a minor variant? Also, I think it's in the response that our planners give, they said it's a reasonable expectation for waterfront properties to have adequate depth. Well, I think that's the responsibility of the buyer as well as the planner. In other words, it's buyer beware. I personally feel that it is not a minor. I would not approve it as a minor variant. I think that there has to be more studies done on the whole project. The fact that it's built on piles, it's not a floating dock, has been brought up. So to me, rather, I think if I were Mr. Cosmo I would follow some of the advice that you have just given as the chair. I do not think that this project should proceed as it is.
Okay, thanks, Len. Brady, go ahead, please.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to follow up on Len's comment there. Len, the shoreline abutting the property is not fish habitat under the zoning bylaw, so it's not environmental protection, which means fish habitat. I just wanted to comment on that. My other comment would be if committee would like to defer this application to allow Mr. Cosman to look into other options for his proposal, and he could bring it back.
Okay, thanks, Brady.
I also, in follow-up to that, the water depth proposal that is there is questioned by the people who are objecting. They say it's not accurate. The chart indicating the depth of water.
Yeah, got it, Len. Thanks. Go ahead, Brady.
Just a further comment on that, if the application were deferred, the owner could provide further depth measurements as well. That is an option.
Okay, so we have the suggestion from planning. We do still have Mr. Marshall on the line. I would like to give him his opportunity to speak. Mr. Marshall, if you'd like to go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine, and just also to let you know, the committee is in receipt of your written comments, so if you could keep your remarks as specific as possible, please. Thanks.
Okay, yes, I agree with you on that point. They were extensive, especially the first letter. I did respond to the planning report also, and I have to say at this point, in the interest of brevity on my part, that I agree with the comments that have been made by the chair and committee members. They are consistent with legal precedent to bear on questions like this. I think there are, hopefully for Mr. Cosma and Mrs. Cosma, less intrusive alternatives that they might explore. I won't repeat all the various and sundry things that I've said in my submissions. I understand there are alternatives. I know that shoreline very well, just so the committee knows. My wife's parents owned the property for 60 years. I've known the property for 30 years until they sold it in 2019. I know every inch of the shoreline and its water depths. And I also am intimately familiar with the creek, which drains the lands on the south side of Cameron Bay and runs through the Cosma property within 4 meters of the of the eastern boundary, because we're on the west of our own property. And that creek has deposited and will continue to deposit tons of sediment into the lake at the exact location, unfortunately, that the Cosmas wish to now place their dock. It's unfortunately the most shallow part of the entire shoreline. It will continue to be shallow unless someone dams that creek and drains the entire south part of the bay in some other direction. I also know, and I won't go on at length at this, but that as a result of the sediment deposits into the lake because of that creek, there has been a local aquatic environment generated over, I would say, the past 3 decades. The fact that the town doesn't have it on their zoning bylaw as EP does not mean that fish don't hatch there, including the green pike, which is a species of concern, and snapping turtles, also a species of concern under the Species at Risk Act, which do exit the waterway there and go up through the forest to lay their eggs and so on and so forth. So it's a good faith concern on my part and the neighbor's part that this is a unique location. And unfortunately for Mr. and Mrs. Cosma, it really, in my submission, the neighbor's submission, is not the ideal location to choose to place a dock, which because of the location and the environment it experiences, requires it to be a functional dock, would require it to extend 55% beyond the maximum. We're, in simple terms, we've kind of gone around about this the wrong way. We should roll back. I'm all in favor of Mr. Cosma looking at alternatives along that shoreline as to what might work. I will just mention, and I don't mean this in any mean spirit, there is a boat. It was docked there. They did enjoy the water this summer based on what they knew they purchased. Now, apparently, we want a larger boat. And I have to warn everyone, and you've probably had complaints from people on the lakes. These boats that have the extreme depth throw huge wakes onto our shorelines and erode them all the time. And those wakes from some of the wakeboard boats and whatnot exceed 2 or 3 feet themselves and would place your boat on the bottom of the lake if a big wave comes in. So there's lots of things to consider here. In fairness to the Cosmas, it would be better in my submission, I agree with the committee, if they would consider withdrawing and studying what might actually work for everybody concerned, including the township. I don't think I'll say more than that at this point because the current's going in that direction.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Marshall. Greg, please.
Sorry, Brady, procedural question. You mentioned about the committee deferring it. I think that if the committee defers it, then it gives the implication that the committee may be in support. Now, I realize that Mr. Cosma has made the application and may be able to amend it or may want to resubmit an amended either version or consider withdrawing the minor variance and looking at a zoning bylaw amendment of some sort, whether it's for the same application or a revised application. Would it not be better for Mr. Cosma to request the deferral as opposed to the committee and the committee approve it? Because I, as a committee member, am not in favor of deferral. I'm quite content to have it come to a vote and let the cards fall where they are. But I think in fairness to Mr. Cosma, to give him an opportunity to either revise his application or have further conversation with planning to see in regards to a zoning bylaw amendment, that it might be better served for Mr. Cosma.
Brady, please.
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Cosma. You have the option if you would like to defer the application. So if you would like to request to defer it, that would allow you the opportunity to either revise your proposal or you could withdraw the application and submit a zoning bylaw amendment instead. So you have two options there if you were to, if the application was deferred. So that is your, if you'd like to request to defer it, then you may do so.
Mr. Cosma, go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to formally request a deferral, and I guess you take a vote on it and make a decision on whether or not you'll accept the deferral.
Okay, that's fine. Then I will draft the deferral motion. Committee's agreeable to that. Well, I'll draft a deferral motion and we'll vote, and then this can carry on in the background. So give me 2 minutes. Okay, so we have a motion to have this application defer. So I need a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Wibb, seconded by Greg. Moved by Wibb, seconded by Greg, that the Committee of Adjustment hereby defers application A-2024-0039-H for Cosma to allow the applicant to reconsider the extent of the requested variances in light of comments received. All in favor? And carried.
Okay, so the application's been deferred, so planning staff will reach out to you later this week to discuss the next steps, okay? Thank you.
Thanks for attending. But I think we're on to hearing schedule. Everyone had a look at the schedule. Any conflicts? Otherwise, I'll ask for a mover and seconder to approve the schedule for next year. Moved by Greg, seconded by Lee. that the Committee of Adjustment for the Corporation of the Township of Seguin hereby approves the Committee of Adjustment hearing schedule for 2025. All in favor? Carried. And I do want to mention one other thing under other business, and as I think everyone knows now, Ashley is carrying on to other endeavors, so we really wish to thank her for keeping us organized, and maybe we'll see you on the other side of the screen, so. Any other business? None heard? Okay, then mover and seconder to adjourn, please. Greg and Lee. Moved by Greg, seconded by Lee, that the Committee of Adjustment for the Corporation of the Township of Seguin does hereby adjourn this hearing at 4:36 PM on Wednesday, November 13th, 2024. Committee will hold its next hearing at 4 PM Wednesday, December 11th, 2024, or at the call of the chair unless the Secretary Treasurer has not received complete applications for committee consideration. All in favor? And carried. Thanks, folks.